Hi, welcome to our online discussion of April 25, 2015.
April 24th.
April 24th.
Yeah.
What I said.
25th.
Oh, sorry. Okay, welcome to our online discussion. Christian Debré and
Amy
Hasbrook, my partner. So, Toujours Vivant-Not Dead Yet is a project of Council of Canadians with Disability to inform, unify, and give voice to the disabled right opposition to assisted suicide, euthanasia, and other ending of life practices that discriminate against people with disability. And please forgive me for some of my trouble with my what did you call it?
Ventures?
Pronunciation, sorry, because I just add my partial.
Yeah.
My partial, so it's hurting a little bit, and I'm not really, I doesn't have any habit to do it. So, sorry. These are many reasons to oppose the legalization of assisted suicide and euthanasia. Here are just a few. It's unnecessary. Everyone has the option to commit suicide or refuse medical care to have palliative sedation on demand.
Yeah.
Already, no law needed.
Don't need a new law. It already exists. People have that right, and disabled people can kill themselves if that's what they want to do.
It's discriminatory.
Right.
While people without disability receive suicide prevention services, if they express a wish to die, people with disability will be encouraged and assisted to die, to kill themselves. Okay? And this is really discriminatory.
It's a double standard, basically.
Choice is an illusion. The choice to die cannot be free as long as people with disability don't have the choice in where and how to live. If you have the choice between dying and a normal life or a good life, it's a free choice. If it's a choice between prison and to die, maybe you will choose to die.
Right.
Safeguard don't work. If it's true, everybody will die under. Okay. Where these practices are legal, safeguards do not prevent people from disability from being wrongly killed.
Right. And that's very much, there's a lot of studies in Europe that have shown that.
Yeah. Thank you. Goal of online discussion. Give a disabled people place to talk about this issue from our point of view, recognize the effect of discrimination and our experience with the medical system, establish our place in the debate as aside from conservative and progressive so-called.
Because our point of view is actually more progressive than the progressives. They think they're being very liberal, but we're actually looking at the public policy behind this all and seeing how the public policy discriminates and how assisted suicide discriminates against disabled people. So,
So today's topics: analysis of reporting on the Supreme Court decision in the Carter case, news briefs, and one announcements. So,
thanks. Okay. So a public relations firm called Earnscliffe did an analysis of articles and editorials for the Council of Canadians with Disabilities and the Canadian Association of Independent Living. Oh, I'm sorry, Canadian Association for Community Inclusion. Community Living, I'm sorry, gee. I don't know where I am.
Don't worry.
Yeah, okay. The firm Earnscliffe examined 281 articles, columns, editorials, op-eds, and letters to the editor in English language newspapers throughout Canada during the month of February, before and after the Carter decision was
So
rendered.
it's kind of excluding Quebec because there is only one or two newspapers.
Right, there's only
That's
one.
called the Gazette in Montreal. And
Yep. So basically, they excluded all of Quebec, and except for the Gazette, and it's kind of it's always disappointing to those of us who live in Quebec because we count too. But oh well. What they found was that personal stories and emotional content were very prominent in the material, in the articles and editorials. But on the other hand, political discussion and analysis of the legal and policy questions were much less common. So it was a lot less discussion about what this means as public policy. Here are a few unsurprising observations. First, the topic of assisted suicide and euthanasia is important to everyone.
surprise.
Surprise, surprise! The vast majority of columns and editorials supported the legalization of assisted suicide.
Surprise,
surprise. The writers believed that the Supreme Court delivered a decision that was fair and well considered.
Surprise again.
Yep, and the author's opinions followed the polls and public opinion. Surprise again.
and again and again.
Yeah. Nothing that we didn't see coming a mile away. The reasons given for supporting assisted suicide and euthanasia were to put an end to people's suffering, allowing people to die with dignity, giving people a peaceful death, and respecting individual choice and autonomy. In the majority thought that the Supreme Court correctly interpreted the Charter of Rights and Freedoms on this point.
So no need to die to have
Dignity? Yeah.
And
the autonomy argument, everybody thinks that being allowed to kill yourself or to have a doctor kill you actually is what's going on.
Yeah.
And doing that gives them autonomy, but they're not looking at the fact that before you get that choice, all your other choices are taken away. So you only get this one last choice. And, 1 out of 100 isn't enough choice. You need the 99 other choices to have freedom.
Yeah.
So there was a consensus of support for safeguards, especially against abuse, but for people who are competent and making a free choice. That's how it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
But there was disagreement as to the structure of the safeguards. The majority don't believe that a slippery slope exists, but
so
right. Well, but I mean, this in the Carter case, the court at the first level said, well, we see conflicting evidence, so there's no slippery slope, basically. So it doesn't exist, and the Supreme Court essentially said the same thing. So everybody's going along with it, like if it were the truth. It's sort of the emperor's new clothes.
It's not completely true, you will see.
Right, the emperor is walking around naked, and everybody's saying, "Oh, what a nice suit of clothes the emperor has." So people are not in agreement as to how we should limit eligibility. Should we limit it to certain persons, only such as people with a terminal illness, or should we exclude certain groups, like people with psychological suffering? There's a lot of different opinions about that going around.
So things begin to be complicated.
Right. And also people don't agree on what process we should use to determine the person's competence and whether she is making a free choice for assisted suicide. So those are some of the questions that are still buzzing around. Everyone agrees that we need more and better palliative care. So that's good. We're going to be on something.
Yeah, nobody could be against virtue.
Right. The commentators believe that Parliament must make a law, and they say there is no patience in the public for invoking the notwithstanding clause. And the notwithstanding clause is basically it would put on hold the court's decision for 5 years.
5 years.
And give Parliament time to do a proper job of dealing with this issue.
Over a very complicated piece of our law.
Right, exactly. But on the other hand, even though they don't have patience to wait for this, they recognize that the process of writing such a law will be difficult and complex.
Oops.
So
contradiction.
Yeah, there's a contradiction here, especially given the fact that there's an election happening this year.
You want the butter and the money for the butter.
Right, exactly. Right. And also, people believe that Parliament will be able to to develop the criteria for access to assisted suicide and euthanasia and prevent abuse. But again, is there going to be enough time? And people sort of aren't really recognizing that they only have a year to do this. And usually laws like this take a long time to put together.
And even then,
with public consultation.
Sometimes there is some flaw. They have to be correct after a few times.
Right, right. People with disabilities were among those who supported the Supreme Court decision, but the Earnscliffe report doesn't offer any quotes on that. So since we lack the data on which this assertion is based, it's hard to measure the degree of support among people with disabilities. So I don't really know why they're saying people with disabilities support, but it could be that the appearance of support comes from the repetition of comments from Stephen Fletcher and also the ad hoc disability group that formed to support the plaintiffs in the Carter case.
Which is standard. When the press finds somebody interesting, they repeat it, and this is the same story in Vancouver, BC to Halifax, Nova Scotia.
Right, exactly. And as I've seen quite often, whenever Stephen Fletcher shows up, he's the only disabled person in the room, and the rest of us are chopped liver. So the majority of people believe that doctors will be involved in medical aid in dying, and that they don't want doctors to be forced to kill people. So
another kind of contradiction.
Right, especially since most doctors don't want to be killing people.
And there will be doctor who will do that, but it becomes some doctor of the death doctor.
Right, exactly. Some doctors make a specialty of it, and that is what has happened in Oregon and other places. There is a doctor in Belgium named Wim who took a group of people on a retreat to Auschwitz to talk about, why we have euthanasia.
In Auschwitz, there is some bad smell in the past
right.
about that.
Yeah. So among the people who oppose assisted suicide and euthanasia, the reasons were the religious reasons, including sanctity of life and the similarity to the abortion issue, the slippery slope reasons, including examples from the Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg, the Benelux countries. And there have been plenty of examples of people who were not otherwise eligible, who were assisted to suicide, and that the law was changed to expand the criteria for those who would be allowed.
It's always expensive, no restricted. Right,
exactly. So there's those two ways. One is that people are allowed, the law is, people are allowed that shouldn't be allowed, but nobody pays attention. And then the law is expanded. So that's two kinds of expansion there. And also people are concerned about the danger of abuse, because elders and people with disabilities experience a higher rate of abuse than people without disabilities.
They are easy target.
Right, exactly. And with difficulty to communicate, and people are trained to be compliant and not to complain or cause trouble. And with assisted suicide, abuse can include coercion to kill oneself. People are convinced and they're threatened and that sort of thing. Suicide assistant, people also talked about the fact that suicide assistance is being substituted for suicide prevention, and that we're changing our public policy, and that's not a good thing.
If you could not have both at the same time.
Right.
You allow suicide, or you do a prevention of suicide.
Right, but not both. And because the way they're doing both is that the group of people who are allowed suicide is people with disabilities and those who are sick. And that's a particular group they're selecting. And also, assisted suicide and euthanasia puts pressure on doctors. And for doctors, killing is not care. The majority of doctors do not believe that killing somebody is caring for them.
And I agree with you.
Yep. The report says that religious themes were the most common. And we're not sure if the Earnscliffe group excluded the 3 Catholic newspapers from their sample in arriving at this conclusion. So in their sample of all the newspapers, there were 3 Catholic newspapers. And so, you know, in their thing, they said the religious view was the most prevalent. And what I'm curious about is whether they say that because it includes the Catholic newspapers, or if that was true aside from the Catholic newspapers.
We don't know.
We don't know. There were not many opinion articles or quotes from people with disabilities. And when disability rights arguments were raised, it was usually academics who were quoted as talking about them. And I'm also not talking about disability studies professors at Ryerson or at Manitoba or in Alberta either. You know, these are, you know, non-disabled academics. And also there was no discussion about the debate within the disability community. And that, I think, comes from the fact that the articles and the editorials didn't really dig into the issue. And if they had, they would have seen that there's a lot of, you know, division in the disability community, and they would have wanted to find out why. But this isn't about, you know, understanding the public policy or understanding the issue. This is about emotions. So that's how people react. And at the end, the report says, despite significant efforts, the narrative and the voice of Canada's disability community has not been heard sufficiently, and this is not adequately reflected in the current editorial opinions. And, you know, I could have told you that before this report came out.
Again.
Right, because this isn't just true about journalism, but it's always been true about journalism. But people with disabilities know that we've never been listened to. And that's why we have the saying, nothing about us without us, because it's always been that non-disabled people have made decisions about us. And this is another case of that. And, you know, in this situation, it's a lot of non-disabled people talking about how afraid they are of becoming disabled. Well, we understand that it's scary, but when you're scared of something, it's not a good idea to make public policy based on that fear, but that's what they're doing. So what's happening is that, quote, the disabled are being mixed and subsumed within the category of the vulnerable. And when you put a "the" in front of a group, that means that it becomes not a group of people, it becomes a mass of something. It's not people, it's things. And this amalgam is seen as an indistinct group without experience, without value, knowledge, or rights. And, you know, that doesn't promote people being able to state their opinion and to have power in their lives. And finally, there's no recognition that the interests of people with disabilities might be different from those of people with a terminal illness. So that's another problem that, of course, isn't nobody sees that because people with disabilities aren't being recognized. And finally, the language of the Carter decision really exacerbated this problem. It contributed, it went with the old theme that, you know, the disabled are a mass of something, and we're gonna tell them what to do, and
including some language confusion.
Right, exactly. There was a lot of confusion. So that's what the report found. It was pretty, there weren't a lot of surprises there, but it was helpful to, you know, at least hear somebody say that, you know, despite our efforts, we have not been heard. And so, yeah, okay, we know. All right, here are some news briefs. First of all, ADAPT in Washington. A group of disability rights activists demanding home-based services and liberation from institutions demonstrated in Washington, D.C. this week. Members of ADAPT, which it stands for American Disabled for Attendance Programs Today, visited the Federal Department of Health and Human Services and the White House, where 53 people were arrested in acts of civil disobedience. During the demonstration, ADAPT members declared that they would rather go to jail than live in a nursing home. And they modified what they used to say, I'd rather die than go to a nursing home. But because so many states are trying to adopt assisted suicide laws, they decided they needed to change what they say because, in fact, people don't want to be killed.
Yeah.
So, okay, the other news brief is that Peter Singer still calling for the killing of disabled babies.
Again.
Still, yep, again and still.
Again and still.
Yeah. Peter Singer is a professor at Princeton University in ethics.
Yeah, ethics or non-ethics.
Yeah, what's the opposite of ethics? Has once again suggested that it would be reasonable for the government and insurance companies to not pay for the treatment of babies with severe disabilities.
Do we earn some money argument over there?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. In 1993, Singer published a treatise called Practical Ethics, in which he called for non-voluntary euthanasia for human beings who are not capable of understanding the choice between life and death. That's what that's his words, including severely disabled newborns. And if you read that piece, he talks about children up to the age of about 3 or 4 because they don't understand anything anyway. So, and then he repeated this position in a radio interview last Sunday in New York. So
this is a big remembrance of eugenic things in the 20 or 30.
Mm-hmm.
30. And I think we had solved that thing 70 or 80 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's going again.
Right.
And it's not more true today than it was before.
Right. And, last September in Berlin, they put up a memorial to all the people with disabilities who were killed in the T4 euthanasia program. And yet, people are still pushing this idea of eugenics and euthanasia.
Which is exactly the same.
Right, exactly. It's the same thing. Okay, so we have a couple of announcements. One is that on Sunday, April 26th, that's 2 days from now, at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, the Citizens with Disabilities Ontario will host an online panel discussion about assisted suicide, and I'm going to be on that panel. On their interactive web conferencing service. To sign up, visit their website at cwdo.org and follow the links. They have a longer site, but I'm not going to read that whole thing. So cwdo.org and follow the links to the conference, the Assisted Suicide Conference on Sunday. Also, the presentation on assisted suicide that was supposed to take place yesterday at Independent Living Montreal has been postponed to May 13th from 5 to 7 p.m. If you would like to attend, please call 514-288-1177. Okay.
I repeat, 514-288-1177. 1177.
Tu veux que je fasse la fin?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Okay,
Because I
okay.
have difficulty to speak.
Okay. Okay, to view our videos, you can go online and search for Euthanasia and Disability, either on Google Hangouts on Air or on YouTube. And if you go to YouTube, you'll see the videos that we've done since September of 2013. Pretty much every week. We take a break in the summer and over the holidays. But we've done a lot of videos so far, and it talks about all subjects related to euthanasia and disability. So it's a pretty good variety. And I posted at one point, not too long ago, on our Facebook page, a document that gives a list of all the topics we've covered. So you can check that out, and I'll put it back up there again sometime soon. Okay, and if you want to participate, you can send me an email with your email address in it, and I will send you a link before we get going on Friday afternoons. Or you can also look on our web Facebook page, rather, and the link will be up there. So you can, since we always have our discussions on Friday afternoons, you can look at our Facebook page. To send me an email, write to info, I-N-F-O, at tv-ndy.ca. You can visit us on Facebook at facebook.com/toujours-vivant, not dead yet. Go to our website at tvndy.ca or follow me on Twitter at @TVNDY. Thanks very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christian. Je suis
Thank you.
très reconnaissant. And hopefully we will see you again next week. Have a good
See you.
week.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.